When we care too much about what others think, we unknowingly hand them the blueprint for how to control us. It's not something we consciously realize, but every time we let someone's opinion dictate our behavior, we sacrifice a piece of our autonomy. The irony is that many of us believe we're making these compromises for the sake of connection, love, or acceptance. But is it really connection if it requires us to mask who we are? Is it truly love if it's conditional on us playing a role someone else has written for us? These are the questions we rarely confront, because doing so would force us to examine the foundation of many of our relationships, and that's uncomfortable. Let's think about this for a moment. How much of your life is shaped by what others expect of you? How many decisions have you made not because they felt true to who you are, but because you feared judgment, rejection, or ridicule? It's a sobering realization that for many of us, the answer is most of it. We spend years chasing degrees we don't care about, jobs that drain us, or lifestyles that feel hollow, all because we're trying to meet someone else's definition of success or worthiness. But what happens when we meet those expectations and still feel empty? What happens when we realize the applause we sought doesn't fill the void? The truth is, no amount of external validation will ever compensate for the loss of authenticity. And yet we continue to chase it, hoping the next compliment, promotion, or social media like will finally make us feel whole. Why do we do this? Why are we so deeply wired to care about others' opinions? Part of it is evolutionary. In ancient times, being accepted by the group was a matter of survival. If the tribe rejected you, you faced the wilderness alone, and that often meant death. But here's the thing, we no longer live in that world. Our survival no longer depends on universal approval, yet we cling to this outdated instinct as if our lives depend on it. And in doing so, we give others the power to shape our lives, often at the expense of our own happiness. Consider this: if you were the only person on earth, what would you do differently? How would you live if there was no one around to judge you, praise you, or compare you to someone else? It's an extreme thought experiment, but it reveals something crucial. Many of the constraints we feel in life are self-imposed.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
They don't come from the world itself, but from our fear of how the world will perceive us. We create prisons in our minds, decorating the bars with the opinions of others, and then convince ourselves there's no way out. The philosopher Epictetus once said, "It is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." This applies perfectly to the opinions of others. Someone might think poorly of you, but that in itself has no real power over you. It's only when you internalize their opinion, when you let their judgment define your sense of self, that it becomes a problem. Imagine someone calling you a failure. The word itself is harmless. It's your reaction to the word, your willingness to believe it, that determines its impact. So the real question is not what do they think of me, but why do I care so much? This brings us to a deeper truth: the opinions of others only matter to the extent that we allow them to. It's not their judgment that binds us, but our attachment to their judgment. And attachment, as countless sages and philosophers have taught, is the root of suffering. When you care too much about what people think, you tie your sense of self-worth to something you cannot control. People's opinions are fickle, ever-changing, and often based on their own insecurities or biases. To base your identity on something so unstable is to guarantee a life of anxiety and dissatisfaction. But breaking free from this attachment is easier said than done. After all, we've spent years, if not decades, building our identities around others' expectations. We've internalized the voices of parents, teachers, peers, and society at large, and these voices have become the lens through which we see ourselves. To let go of this lens feels like stepping into the unknown, and that's terrifying. Who are we without these voices? who are we if we strip away the labels, roles, and expectations that others have placed on us? This is where the work begins. To stop caring about what others think doesn't mean becoming indifferent or selfish. It means reclaiming your right to define your own life. It means realizing that your worth is not something anyone else can give or take away. It's intrinsic, unchanging, and independent of external validation. But to live from this place of self-worth requires courage, the courage to disappoint people, to challenge their expectations, and to stand firm in your truth, even when it's uncomfortable. So let me ask you, what would you do if you weren't afraid of disappointing anyone? What risks would you take if you weren't paralyzed by the fear of failure or ridicule? These are not hypothetical questions. They cut to the heart of what it means to live authentically. Because the truth is, you cannot please everyone. No matter how hard you try, there will always be someone who disapproves of you, misunderstands you, or criticizes you. This is not a reflection of your worth, but of their perspective. And their perspective is shaped by their own experiences, beliefs, and fears, none of which have anything to do with you. To live authentically, then, is to accept that you will be misunderstood. It's to embrace the fact that some people will not like you, and that's okay. Their disapproval does not diminish your value, just as their approval does not enhance it. Your value is inherent, and it's time we stop outsourcing it to others. This doesn't mean you should ignore all feedback or reject all criticism. It means learning to discern which voices are worth listening to and which are not. It means developing the wisdom to recognize when someone's opinion is a genuine attempt to help you grow and when it's simply a projection of their own insecurities. But even as we talk about authenticity and self-worth, there's a deeper question that lingers: who are we really? If we strip away the layers of expectation, judgment, and identity, what remains? Are we simply a collection of roles: parent, friend, employee, artist, or is there something deeper beneath the surface? This question isn't just philosophical, it's practical, because until we know who we are, we cannot truly be ourselves. And until we can truly be ourselves, we will always be at the mercy of others' opinions. Let's talk about the hidden trap in seeking validation from others. It feels like control, doesn't it? When people approve of you, when they praise you or admire you, it feels as though you've gained some power, some assurance that you're doing life the right way. But this is the illusion. The truth is, the more you chase validation, the less control you actually have. Because every moment you make a decision based on how others might perceive it, you hand over your freedom. You give them the reins, allowing their opinions to dictate your actions. And the more you do this, the more you become a slave to their ever-changing judgments. Think about it for a moment. How often do people's opinions shift? Someone who admires you today might find fault with you tomorrow. Someone who criticizes you today might praise you next week. Human judgment is inconsistent and fueled by emotions, biases, and circumstances that have nothing to do with you. So why would you build your life on something so unstable? Why would you allow your sense of self to be determined by something that's as fleeting as the weather? Here's the harsh reality: you will never win the game of validation. Even if you manage to please one group of people, there will always be another group that disapproves. Even if you meet one person's expectations, those expectations will evolve, grow, or contradict each other. The rules of this game are designed to keep you chasing, never arriving. And the prize for winning? A hollow sense of acceptance that disappears the moment the applause fades. So the question isn't how to win this game, it's whether you should be playing it at all. Let's take this deeper. Why do we crave validation in the first place? On the surface, it seems like a desire for acceptance, belonging, or love. And while there's truth to that, there's something even more fundamental at play: fear. Specifically, the fear of being nothing. When we don't know who we are, we look to others to tell us. Their approval becomes proof that we exist, that we matter, that we're enough. But this is a dangerous foundation to build a life on. Because if your sense of worth comes from external validation, then it can also be taken away by external rejection. You've outsourced your identity, and in doing so, you've given away your power. So what's the alternative? How do we break free from this cycle? The first step is recognizing that validation isn't about others, it's about you. The need for approval arises from your own insecurities, your own doubts about your worth. And until you confront those doubts, no amount of external praise will ever satisfy you. You'll always need more, because the real issue lies within, not outside. This is why people who seem to have it all, success, fame, admiration, often feel empty. They've built their lives on validation, and no matter how much they receive, it's never enough to fill the void. This brings us to an uncomfortable truth: the only way to stop caring about what others think is to start caring about what you think. Not in a superficial, ego-driven way, but in a deep, honest way. What do you truly value? What do you truly want? Who are you beneath the layers of roles and expectations? These are not easy questions to answer, but they're the questions that matter. Because the moment you start living in alignment with your own truth, the opinions of others lose their grip on you. They don't disappear, but they no longer define you. You become like a tree rooted in solid ground, unshaken by the storms of judgment. But this isn't just about finding inner peace or self-confidence. It's about reclaiming your life. When you stop caring about what others think, you free yourself to take risks, to make mistakes, to pursue what truly matters to you. You stop living on autopilot, following a script that someone else wrote for you, and you start living deliberately. And this is where true freedom lies, not in doing whatever you want, but in doing what feels true to you, regardless of how others might perceive it. Of course, this path isn't easy. It requires courage, because living authentically often means going against the grain. It means being misunderstood, criticized, or even rejected. But here's the paradox: the more you embrace this freedom, the less those judgments affect you. Because when you know who you are, when you trust your own judgment, the opinions of others lose their power. They become like background noise, present, but irrelevant. Let me ask you something: how would your life change if you stopped trying to impress people who don't truly care about you? How much time and energy would you save if you stopped worrying about opinions that won't matter in a year, or even a week? These are not rhetorical questions. They're an invitation to reflect on the choices you're making and the reasons behind them. Because the truth is, most of us spend our lives trying to impress people we don't even like. We chase approval from colleagues, acquaintances, or strangers on the internet, while neglecting the relationships and values that truly matter to us. Why do we do this? What are we hoping to gain? And is it worth the cost? This is where ancient wisdom becomes so relevant. Think about Marcus Aurelius' words: don't waste the rest of your time here, worrying about other people, unless it affects the common good. There's a profound simplicity in this statement. It reminds us that our time is limited, that every moment we spend worrying about others is a moment we're not living fully. And it challenges us to focus on what truly matters: our own growth, our own contribution, our own journey. But let's not romanticize this too much. Letting go of what others think isn't a one-time decision. It's a practice, something you have to work on every day. It means catching yourself when you're seeking approval and asking, is this really what I want, or am I just trying to be liked? It means setting boundaries, saying no, and risking disapproval in order to stay true to yourself. And it means accepting that not everyone will understand or accept you, and that's okay. Because your life is not a performance. It's not a show for others to applaud or critique. It's yours, and yours alone. When you truly internalize this, something shifts. You start to see the opinions of others for what they are, reflections of their own minds, not of your worth. You realize that their praise or criticism says more about them than it does about you. And in this realization, you find a quiet kind of power, the power to live on your own terms, free from the need for validation.